Welcome back to Alcohol and Anime Night, but we are, of course, the show that gets you drunker, gets you fatter, and in this case, may actually help you achieve that cultural insight in diversity that you've been looking for. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back, everyone. This week, we've got a treat for you. I've got a treat for you. I say we, like the royal we, like I'm Venom or something. But this week, I really want to feature two special things. One is one of my favorite alcohols to enjoy on Alcohol and Anime Night, and that is my favorite Jameson whiskey. Jameson whiskey's fantastic, and got to give it its due here, so we'll get to that a bit later. And the anime itself is a really fun one. And based on the responses I got from the redo of Healer, you guys like the raunchy ones, so you're my kind of people already. But this week, we're going to talk about Interspecies Reviewers, which was also known as Ishuzoku Reviewers. And this one's fun. It takes the concept of R-rated, hilarious, sexy comedy and throws a rocket pack on it and goes through the roof. It has so much fun. It was banned in some places, which to me, that's a seal of approval. That means that it's fun, it's crazy, and let's get into it right away. So, Interspecies Reviewers, it's a very simple concept that they take and actually go fairly deep with it. So the concept is this: several characters. Our main character, his name's Stunk. He's a human. There's Zell. He's an elf, and there's a few other characters. But then there's another character they meet just in Act 2 of Episode 1 called Krim. I'll get a little later. And the basic premise of the entire series, which ran for 12 episodes starting in the winter of 2020. And the entire premise is that these adventurers go out during the day and do adventuring stuff, slaying monsters, going on quests and stuff like that. But the series really doesn't focus on that at all. In fact, it's a bit of just a background to establish the plot. The real story is about when they're done with work, they go to the pub, they eat, they drink, and of course, in this world, it is a melting pot of different species, different characters, different races. So we've got elves, humans, demons, beastmen, halflings, fairies, anything you can think of exists. And they all live in this world. And they all live in this town, which is, again, kind of a melting pot. And so after work, the gentlemen and ladies go out afterwards and enjoy the services of the ladies of the night in these brothels. And everybody's kind of like, everybody does it, but doesn't really kind of talk about it. It's kind of like one of those low-key type things. But it's a huge business in this town. And at some point, the characters get to talking about it and actually discussing it, which is, if I can back up, it's one of those things that weirdly men don't do as often as actually have those conversations with other men about their exploits beyond things that they are kind of bragging about, really having kind of in-depth discussions. Anyway, so they're having this discussion, and the interesting thing, and this is the very first, I'm not giving too much away, a tiny little spoiler, I guess, but it happens in the first 9 minutes, so what do you want? The one elf character, elves they live a very, very long time, and the human character is coming out of a brothel, and he's just gotten done, hanging out with this cool elf girl, and the elf, his elf friend sees him and is like, oh, how can you be into that? She's 400 years old. And, of course she doesn't look like it. She looks, young and spry because she's an elf. And he's like, I don't care. She looks to be, the right age to me. And the elf is like, oh, that's gross. That's so gross. How can you stand that? And then a few moments later, a 55-year-old human walks by, And this little elf guy is like, oh wow, oh she's so hot, oh she's so young, and not one of you humans. I've never seen one over 100 years old. So you guys are so young, and it's just so funny, the perspective. And that's they take that concept and then they're like kind of fighting, like, oh, how can you like the old elves? Oh, how can you like the 55-year-old 60-year-old women that are humans? And they fight back and forth, and eventually what happens, they get their friends together and they're like, I want you to write a review based on the ones you've been to, what you think about elf versus this. And it so starts this review process of brothels, and they start going through everything. And throughout the entire series, they meet different characters that have different tastes, different and they kind of give everything a chance. And it is funny, it's sexy. There's two different versions. There's a censored version and an uncensored version. I actually recommend both. I can't believe I'm saying it, but I recommend both. The uncensored version, the way they do the censoring actually is a part of the comedy, so they really do a good job with that. And if you watch the uncensored version, believe it or not, it's not just like, sometimes you see stuff you don't want to see, and you're like, so that's part of the funny, the comedy as well. So I actually recommend both. If you got somebody you're watching it with that's maybe a little shy or squeamish or something like that, obviously go with the one. But I say if you can watch each, it's totally worth it, because there's actually, I think, 3 different versions that they ended up producing because of the type of content. They had to kind of change it. So there's like a censored version, there's an uncensored version, and there's one that's kind of in the middle, which I think one of the broadcast companies, I can't remember, but that's the one that's kind of floating out there. So I love it. So again, they have the different reviews of the different brothels, and it was so, the content was so, I guess, I want to say aggressive, because it's not really, but it was so R-rated that Funimation actually pulled the content from their live streaming, or for their streaming service. So I don't know if you've seen some of the stuff that's on there. They have just about anything. They pulled it. And to me, that was like, I gotta see this show. If it's that crazy, then I gotta see it. And it was totally worth it. Another fun thing, the theme song. The theme song gets you almost right at the beginning. It's like a sound-alike of YMCA, which is even funnier because that song is like an earworm. It gets into your head anyway. So you'll find yourself almost kind of like humming along to it later in the day, which then makes you think back to the series and then makes you laugh. So I really think they had a lot of success with it. Maybe a little bit of a Streisand effect by saying, don't watch this, and then everybody goes to watch it. So unlike Redo of Healer, where it's just kind of like, I don't feel good about this, it really works. It's really fun. One thing that I thought was kind of neat is that, I don't know if it was unexpected or something that they tried to do, or something that just so happened to fall into place, but believe it or not, this show, the underlying message is actually to have understanding about different cultures, maybe have understanding about the way people look, the way people act, and kind of in the end understand that we have we have a lot of things in common. And in this case, sex is something everybody has in common. So it's a really cool way of actually saying, judge people by the experiences you have with them, not by what you hear or what you see. And I don't know if it was an accident or if they built it in there as kind of like a trick. There's been a couple of anime like that where you watch it, and then as you're soaking it in, you're thinking, there's actually a moral or like an underlying message here rather than just what's coming through, which in my opinion is the true definition of art, when you have those different levels. So whether it was intentional or not, it is there. And if you look for it, it's actually, in today's world, a pretty important message about learning about the differences and how we can find similarities, which may just be comedy and laughing and things like that. So I really liked it. I recommend it. So please check it out. And let me know what you think, which one you watched, and what you thought. If it was too much, if you were covering your eyes, I don't know. But I think you guys will like it. If you watch the opening credits, even the opening credits have a censored and uncensored version. So if you're clever on YouTube, you can probably find it, or or otherwise. It's pretty simple to find. I don't think anybody really has the distribution rights to it right now, so I think it's out there for Americans to pretty much see as it is. But on to our tasty beverage for the evening, which is Jameson whiskey. Now, Jameson whiskey is a super smooth Irish whiskey. It is one that you can actually drink right out of the bottle. To me, this is good at room temperature. This is good. I really don't like doing it for shots, if I'm honest, because it tastes so good. I don't want to waste it. I don't want to just throw it back. This is one, I like it to be in my mouth. I like it to swirl it around. I like the flavor. It's very good. Like I said, just room temperature. Out of the bottle, I know it sounds like a weird alcoholic thing to say, but out of the bottle, it's actually good. Something about the glass and I don't know, it actually tastes good that way. Another way I prefer it is in a whiskey sour. Again, I don't like cutting the flavor of it so much, but it really does work with a whiskey sour. So if you're not a person who goes to a bar and orders a drink and maybe you're intimidated by, I don't know, are they going to make the drink the way I want it? I recommend a whiskey sour. The reason is most people can't mess it up. So if the 19-year-old bartender, it's like their second day on the job, it's really just whiskey, sour mix. Sometimes they'll put a little bit of egg white in there, cherry on top. It's a pretty simple recipe. You can, of course, make it at home for pennies on the dollar, which I love to do. A couple of ice cubes, maybe not. It all depends on how you're doing it. Put it in a rocks glass like this. When you're done with it, it'll look like this when it's empty, like mine is. But I really recommend Jameson. Easy to find anywhere. If you're going to have I always say if you have a kind of drink of choice, make sure it's available everywhere, or at least most places. So Jameson is considered a top shelf, unfortunately, most places. To me, that's a reach, calling it top shelf whiskey, but in most bars, that's what they're going to charge you for. But at home, definitely, I always recommend it, and again, one that you can, it's kind of a staple that you should have in any bar, but for me, I usually try to stock a little bit more because I enjoy it so much, so. Well, that's it for this episode, and let me know what more you guys want to see. What other types of anime do you want me to review? Do you want me to review more stuff I don't like? Do you want me to review some older stuff, more old man anime? I've got plenty of those, trust me. I've been around for a while. I do have a couple coming up here. I have one that I'm finishing up now called Darling and the Franxx, which people were going bonkers over. To me, seems a little bit like an Evangelion ripoff, which I'm sure I'm going to mention 1,000 times in that review. But it is pretty good so far, and maybe a modern-day adaptation. I also have some really cool snacks coming. Just ordered a 2-pound bag of Japanese hull-less popcorn that was from a farmer that does pretty much just that. So that's coming in here. I had to buy an air popper just for that. But, the sacrifices I make for you guys. So. As always, it's been a pleasure. I love having you guys. I love talking about anime with you. And come by.